Okay, this is the rough draft of our Rhetorical Situations animation by Sam D-Line, Sam Nelson. Wait, are they both Samuel or Sam? I don't even remember. And me, Ben. So, going into this with the focus that our assignment is to show that we know how different rhetorical situations shape the information we receive, by demonstrating that we understand how rhetorical situations, including context, exigence, audience, and constraints, and the rhetor, shape the final product. And our idea to best present this was to present this so it doesn't seem like we're just trying to get the work done, just trying to get the assignment done, but make it seem natural. So if someone was to stumble across this, it would seem not just like we're trying to get the assignment done for a class. And so what we try to do is mask it with an educational purpose as our focus for the animation, and therefore allow us to explain the ideas of rhetorics kind of as if we're knowing them or trying to teach them. And the question is, with knowing the purpose of the following animation, or the attempted animation, one guy on the script, do we effectively cover the ideas of demonstrating we understand rhetorical situations in the terms of context, exigence, audience, constraints, and the rhetor? And we barely even touch on how different rhetorical situations shape the information we receive, but those are related ideas. So let's get started. So this is Ed. Ed's going to help me with teaching you guys about rhetorical situations. And so, what is it, and why are we talking about it? We're talking about rhetorical reading skills. So we're talking about some form of reading skill. But this type of reading skill is a deep reading skill. Of course, one of many deep reading skills to impress your teachers with, but also to help better your own understanding of what you're reading and what you're hearing. Reading rhetorically is like asking why. Why say this? Why write it like that? Or why someone said this instead of this? It can be like asking why the writer, why they are writing, but it's more than that. That's only part of reading rhetorically. The power of reading rhetorically is to explain why what is said or written made the way it is. How was it formatted like this? These kind of ideas apply to everything: writing, daily talking, letters to the editor, videos, speeches, but not limited to, art. Simply any format of communication can be viewed at rhetorically. So it's a big idea. Lots of essays and other works have been made over the past 2 millenniums talking about it and trying to develop the concept of it. But this presentation, it's just going to be a gift basket compared to the other works. We're just going to show some basic guide and apply some ideas of real-life examples. So, first off, who is writing or talking, or the author of any work, is called the rhetor. They are the maker who interpret what is going to be called a rhetorical situation. They are important because who they are explains a lot of why of what they said, such as if they're a lawyer, a politician, a journalist, a young child, or have a track record of like lying type of thing, just to get attention. Second is audience. These are the people who receive the message. So this can be both the target audience and those unexpected. The audience can get a message, and this message relies on the audience's own interpretation and can be different from what was literally said, but maybe implied, and or something completely different and not intended for. These two things, the target audience and trying to get a message across to them, directs the speaker on what they can say and write, or known as constraints. Knowing the audience and what the focus is allows us to understand what type of constraints the writer has, or the speaker, when it comes to making whatever message they're trying to make. If you had to talk to some young kids or toddlers, it's best to leave the dictionary on the shelf and talk in more simple terms. Now here's a fancy word. Exigence. It's basically asking why write? Asking why is the most basic of deep skills. It's asking what is this about? Why do we need to talk or write about it? What are we trying to do? Simply, what are the motives of writing or reading? Lastly, for all of this to work and make sense and relate, you have to have context or else you're gonna have a bad time. This is both what is literally said and what is expressed. There's also the implied meaning, then there's the situation knowledge that the writer has, the rhetorical situation, as it's called, and then there's what the reader has and what they can interpret, as well as information beyond the situation. And the context can explain the dynamics of many replies, a discussion, or the development of a work, and can explain even if it was effective. The focus of context is the situation. It can talk about the past, the present, and why this history, why this trail, why these patterns. It can even go into the future. However, I warn you this, do not get trapped. When you're reading or talking about something rhetorically, you can be very general. You may not even barely even talk about the actual subject. I even encourage you to be general. If you start explaining the work, focusing on what's going on, or explaining what you think is going on, or your thoughts about it, who's right, who's wrong, or what you think is right, then you have gotten yourself trapped into the context or the situation of the work, and that's no longer thinking rhetorically. You've focused on context. If you try to explain fully on why, you can go deep into psychology and you can accidentally exclude some other parts of rhetorics. You can go deep and deep and deep to explain and make your case well articulated, but that's not going to be the focus of our work here. Rhetoric being such a big topic and touching so many different fields, we're going to talk about making a rhetorical claim. Basically a simple explanation or a thesis of what we think is happening with the work. And to guide us, we're going to focus on the debate between pro-gun versus pro-gun regulation. And we are going to look at real-world examples, and we're going to rhetorically analyze them. And with when we're talking, we're going to be thinking about the situation, what's going on with the rhetor, and what they're trying to do. We won't be talking about who's right, who's wrong, or even maybe what's going on too much. We may even paraphrase videos to completely out of context. But that is kind of the natures of rhetoric sometimes. So when it comes to rhetorical claims, there's the rhetorical situation. And that's, for the most part, what happens in the making of a text, what the writer is doing, what encouraging the context of the situation, the exigence, and the motives. So it's the making of the text. And by looking at these examples, we're going to be pointing out three types of ideas. How rhetorical situations forms the text, how different situations affect the text, and what patterns can be made overall in the many claims, arguments, and talks within the pro-gun versus pro-gun regulation debate that we currently have going on. So to help try and clear out some of the stuff I'm going to say next, I'm going to have a color code chart of rhetorical claims. And so a rhetorical claim is like a thesis, and there's certain parts to it. We have the context in blue, we have the exigent, we have the rhetor, and we have the audience, as well as constraints. And to give you an idea of how these relate, here's a kind of format, just an example, but not all of them follow this type of layer. There's no one right way to do it, so long as you talk about many of all the ideas of rhetorics. So with this example format of like a thesis, with the situation like this type of context, the writer is encouraged with these ideas. The text is formatted as so due to the writer being this, such as the journalist, and so they are addressing these priorities, such as a news anchor, a job or something. Because of the target audience, maybe kids, they do it like so, such as talk simply. And that's the basic principle and idea of going on, and how you relate all these different things coming together into one or more. It's more than one sentence, but it's the claim to make when talking about someone rhetorically. As you know, as I maybe say the situation's like this, and then I kind of ignore what's going on. I just talk about the rest of all the points in rhetorics. So let's look at an example. Double D, what do you have for us? Okay, so this is a copy of a Twitter feed. Mormon Democrats says, wanting sensible gun laws does not make me anti-gun, just like how wanting sensible traffic laws doesn't make me anti-car. So what's going on here? We know that he's for gun laws. We can tell that there's been claims made against him that he's anti-gun, and he's trying to refute such claims in such a way that would make sense. But let me elaborate this out more in it's a bit more technical, but only so I can highlight some key points. So it's a bit jumbled, and see if I can't get it right the first time reading it. So, it is evident that the tweeter Mormon Democrat has been accused of the notion that they are against guns, and has tries to refute such claims because they do not want the labels due to its nature to generalize negative ideas that would then be placed on him with logic, or at least this or other past arguments, and is trying to retain an intact appearance or stance on his opinions by repealing such ideas. The tweet is formatted due to Mormon Democrat looking to be an individual with a view in support of gun laws or gun regulations. Given the focus of the single argument presented in the tweet, the case stands that Mormon Democrat is speaking to those who have made such arguments against him to be errorous, and tries to use logic or at least a counter-argument to disprove these prior claims, and did so simply and quickly by being direct with one example, assuming those who make such claims would also understand the outside source of traffic laws and make the connection that you cannot use such logic. So I added some fancy words to this stuff, but that is, there's 3 ideas going on that a claim has been made against I can only say when I'm reading the sentence. Tweeted formatted to I can't even say it anymore. That first word, I can say Democrats. So Democrats been accused with being called anti-gun, and refute that. As to explaining why, you can go into psychology and stuff, such as the negative impact it has of label and that particular label, and he's trying to get rid of that label. And why it could be because he's trying to retain appearance, a stance, or his saying that his opinions are solid ground. And from the looks of it, it looks to be an individual's view who is in support of guns and gun regulation, and is trying to defend himself from those saying he is against guns all in general. And it was a single argument focused tweet, and it was directed to those who make the claims of the arguments that he is anti-gun. And he tries to say this is erroneous and uses a counter-argument. That, although that is the context, he tries to disprove the prior claims. That is constraints. That is a constraint. You have to use logic, because you can't just talk to people and tell them what to think. Often you have to prove or disprove what other people think to be right or wrong, or correct, or the proper or the best way. And that was one of the constraints. And they did so simply and quickly. That could be the context, but it could also be hinting that they're constrained to making a quick tweet and not so much a whole essay. By being direct with one example, presenting this one example, it assumes that they know the traffic and that they would apply such logic and understand the logic being applied in the first notion would apply to the second notion, and if the first or if the second doesn't make sense, why would the first? And you could go down the rabbit hole that is explaining philosophy of logic and all that, and what is logical, and fallacies and stuff. But that's focusing on one topic too much. In general, we're making the claim that he's trying to defend himself, because he's an individual with a view, and he's had claims made against him, and he disagrees with the claims with logic and tries to use logic as well as for our own subjective reason to defending ourselves. And that's just really, that just shows you just that one simple tweet. You can go down so many rabbit holes. Now, I talked about the do not get trapped part. When it comes to this, there can be people who try to read rhetorically and do it like so. Wanting sensible gun laws does not make me anti-gun. And then they'll stop there and say, yes it does. That is a critical failure, because you just gave out your thought and you're focusing on what was just said. You're not focusing on why it was said. Perhaps that would be in the getting caught up in the context, but perhaps someone would say, or they say that because they don't want to look bad. And I'll say, that's not entirely wrong. If we look back, in purple, the exigence is trying to retain an intact appearance or stance on his opinions by repealing such ideas. That's a bit more technical way of saying it. And of course you could go down through psychology and explain even more, but it's the same idea. However, if you just say he's just trying not to look bad, then you're just focusing on exigence. You need to bring in the context, such as the guns and the claims that have been made, or seems to be have made. There's no actual evidence, but that is the context of the actual text that we can assume. And we can also assume that the person tweeting is an individual, and they're making an argument towards those who make the claim to Democrats. I can't say that first word. Okay. Now for the next lineup of examples, videos, and text, rather than explain them, will make claims, hopefully clear enough for you to understand them, continuing the color coding and perhaps not as technical as this, only so we can have a collection of claims and notice what patterns are being made by like bringing in all the different highlights of different things, the color coding, and then focusing on how these different situations seem to make different dynamics within the context or within the rhetorical claims, and try and match them up and find patterns going on within the talks about guns, pro-guns versus pro-laws. However, this is all that is of the video right now. Can't go any further. It goes up, it goes down, and that's all it does. So, thank you for watching.